Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Welcome to Unless, the podcast, inspired by that Dr. Seuss quote from the Lorax that reminds us of the role we can each play in making the world a better place. Join Dr. Hemma Lomax and her guests as they share incredible stories of being moved to decisive action and perseverance, leading to tangible impact at scale. This podcast is a production of Corporate Compliance Insights.
We all go to law school, and I'm going to speak for every lawyer ever, thinking we're going to change the world. We're going to help the downtrodden and those who need representation. We're going to step up and do it. Not quite true once you get out in the real world for a lot of us. And so I'd always wanted to do something that I thought was furthering the ball of humanity. And of course, I'm a Texan, so we think, talk, and eat money a lot. So that's not something we're shy about talking about. And being very successful is something we talk about a lot, big egos and all of that jazz. And so in the corporate world, what I realized was, or what I stumbled upon was, corporate compliance makes businesses run more ethically. And then I discovered more ethically run companies are actually better run companies. And so I put the two and two together, and I said, if I can help fight the international scourge of bribery and corruption, which costs the world $3 trillion annually, according to the United Nations, that's a good thing. And I can do it in the context of being a corporate lawyer working in the energy industry in Houston, Texas, pontificating, evangelizing, writing, speaking, etc. And I just became incredibly passionate about doing anti-corruption work inside of corporations. Everyone has a role in the anti-corruption world.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Unless, the podcast, featuring Thomas Fox, widely recognized as the voice of compliance. Tom Fox has transformed the landscape of corporate compliance, from his beginnings as a legal counsel to becoming a prolific author, podcaster, and advocate. Tom has dedicated his career to embedding ethical practices within organizations. His work, including the Compliance Podcast Network and children's books like Speaking Up is Awesome, underscores his commitment to fostering a culture where speaking up is not just encouraged, but celebrated. Most recently, Tom released a new book, Upping Your Game: How Compliance and Risk Management Move to 2030 and Beyond. Now, this is a must-read for any risk and compliance professional hoping to leverage emerging technology for impact at scale. Tom, I couldn't be happier to have you on Unless, the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Hemma. It's really my pleasure.
Tom, you have really launched my podcasting career, so we'll get into that a little bit. But the first thing I like to ask all of my guests, which I've learned from you, is to have them introduce themselves in their own words. Who are you, and how did you end up in a career centered around corporate compliance?
I am a lawyer by professional training. I've been a lawyer for 40 plus years. The first 25 or so, I was a trial lawyer. I burned out on that and went into the corporate world. I went to work at Halliburton doing contracts. I ended up doing contracts all over the world. I was the single guy, so I got to travel, and I was a designated troubleshooter. I lived in Dubai and did contracts, and being a troubleshooter sounds cool, and it was cool, but here was the deal. The business guys did all the work, and they would bring me in at the last minute when there was one or two things left. But I would fix it. I would get the deal done because, unlike litigation, contract is not a competition negotiation. Everybody wants the same thing. You just fiddle around till you get to the right language. So I looked like this huge hero anyway, because I was the guy who got things done. And then I was able to leverage that position to a general counsel position of another oilfield service company who in 2007 had the largest FCPA fine in the history of the world ever. At that point, 27 million, not even in the top 30 today. And that was really my first exposure to corporate compliance. So and back then you didn't remediate until you had settled. So I was part of the new management team that was brought in to build out the compliance program in the organization. And I learned about how to build policies and procedures and compliance. Eventually, the company got sold. My job went away. And so I decided what I really wanted to do with my life was race bicycles. So I went off on this great adventure to race bicycles. 20 and 40Ks. I was over 50. I could ride in the senior division and had great fun until on one training ride, I got taken out by a Hummer. So that ended my cycling career. And fortunately, my worst injury was a double fractured left leg, but I was just really banged up internally and bruised organs and stuff like that. And it just took forever to heal. So I laid around for a couple of months, finally got enough energy to get on my walker and toddle into my office. And I realized I was going to have to do something like go back to work, because although I said I was practicing law while I was raising, I had no work and I had no clients. And so I decided after you have one of those life-changing events, you think about, what do I really want to do? And I decided what I really wanted to do was build out compliance programs. I enjoyed that a lot, it turned out. And in 2010, there were almost no lawyers in private practice doing that. If they were in private practice dealing with compliance, it was generally to either do investigations or negotiate with the government. And if you need to do investigations, you need bodies. I was a solo guy. And if you need to, I didn't think I should sit across the table from the DOJ, because I'd never been a DOJ lawyer or any sort of criminal experience. So I became the nuts and bolts guy. And so looking back, the one thing I truly regret is I did not trademark the phrase working from home. Because I couldn't leave the house except to go to physical therapy. So couldn't go have a drink, couldn't go have dinner, couldn't go to a conference, couldn't go to a meeting, couldn't do anything. And the only thing I had on my hands was time. So I started exploring social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of that. I knew nothing about that at that point. I'd always written a lot of articles as a lawyer, so I started blogging. And that's how it all started. And the blogging led to podcasting. The podcasting led to founding the Compliance Podcast Network. That led to the pandemic year, where prior to the pandemic, almost all marketing compliance was done in person. Trade shows, conferences, breakfast roundtables, meetings, lunches, dinners, etc. And of course, that was all gone. And even by 2020, I had the largest social media presence in compliance. So I had every product provider in compliance who had money to spend saying, how long can you get access to your network? And so my little world exploded. I went from about 60,000 downloads a month to 200,000 downloads a month. And since that time, I've just tried to basically consolidate and build upon the growth I sustained in 2020.
What an incredible story. Wow, Tom, so much to unpack there. And I'm thinking back to your cycling story. What a good metaphor for life, really, in terms of getting on that bike, going as fast as you can, seeing around corners, and not wasting a good crisis. When trouble hit, you knew what to do with it, and you used it. We don't wish that upon anyone, of course, but you used it as a catalyst to really get to your purpose and fulfill it and be creative around it. So yeah, we're going to pick up those themes. It's amazing.
What I learned from that was I'd always known if the universe closes one door, it opens another.
Yeah.
But what I had not fully appreciated was you have to have the courage to walk through it.
Yes.
And so that's what I learned. And it wasn't so much I had courage, it's just I had nothing to lose. Whatever got me through that door, it did.
Isn't that often the case? Having nothing to lose is when you start to take the risks you really maybe always should have taken, but we stopped ourselves. So lovely.
Right.
We're going to map all of this onto compliance in a moment. But if I may, Tom, I'm greedy for more facts about your story, your origin story. I didn't know half of that about you, which is why this is such a wonderful opportunity to have you as a guest. Let's go back to little Tom, who decided to be a lawyer. Maybe you didn't decide to be a compliance officer. I think most of us didn't know this was a profession back then. But why? What moved you to go to the law when you were younger, making those decisions?
So when I was about 5, my grandfather, who was an immigrant, took me aside and said, every family needs a lawyer and a doctor. Wow. And you are not smart enough to be a doctor, so you're going to be the lawyer. So there it is.
And there it was, 5 years
There it
old.
was.
Wow. Okay.
And he knew back then.
Wonderful. Okay, so inspired by your grandfather, whether it was negative reinforcement or not, you said, I'll figure out what that is then, and didn't look back by the sounds of it. Drilling Controls and Halliburton, these are big companies, and as you said, interesting challenges while you were there, especially if they've been under the radar when it comes to FCPA investigations. So what was it like as a GC, as an in-house lawyer, being woken up to the world of compliance in that way?
So we had an extraordinarily robust monitorship. And I cannot emphasize the robustness of that monitorship. So I have a very jaded view of monitors. I know how bad they can go. And so I'm really interested. I don't know if you had a chance to read the new memo on monitorships yet.
Yeah, about to say, yeah.
Yeah. So I've just finished up, and next week I'm doing an entire blog series on the speech and the new documents, but I welcome their approach to monitorships. So however, and I will give all credit to the monitor for the following, and I don't know what your professional experience was, but my professional experience as a lawyer was the times I learned the most were the times I worked for the most difficult people.
Right.
And I worked for some very difficult people, but I learned from them. And the monitor was that way. I didn't work for him. He was a partner at a law firm, and he was extraordinarily caustic. He was extraordinarily difficult. Nothing was ever good enough, but I learned, and I learned literally from him. Here are the building blocks of a best practice compliance program. And I am still using policies and procedures he wrote in 06 and 07. They were that robust, and they still provide a framework for, it's largely around supply chain side of compliance, which back then no one was looking at, but that's where the violation had occurred in the company. So he was very focused on that. The downside was I learned a lot. The upside was he was extraordinarily difficult to work with.
No, I see that. And look, that's an interesting take on that. I'd love to hear more about your position on monitorships. I have some views as well. But just pausing for a second on what you can learn even in a caustic environment. That's very interesting, Tom. It can, just a caustic relationship can put you off learning anything, but somehow you found the lessons, and apparently lifelong lessons that are the building blocks for some of what you've done since then. That's really important.
Still use them today?
Yeah. I'll give you my thoughts on monitorships and get your response. One thing I worry about with the monitors that are selected is that they just don't have the in-house experience. They don't really understand how the business works. And there can be a big chasm between best intentions in terms of building blocks and government regulation and guidance and operational reality on the ground. So is that a fair observation? And if so, how did you manage that in your experience?
It's absolutely a fair observation. And I was thinking about this morning when I was working out. So some monitors ships failed because the monitor was so bad. They saw themselves as adjunct prosecutors, and it was a huge gotcha exercise. Some, frankly, were idiots, and they knew nothing about compliance. They were very good prosecutors, but they had zero knowledge nor any curiosity to learn. And those were failures too. Some, I don't want to be too specific here, but some approved DPA settlements or DPA releases while the same company was engaging in another set of bribery and corruption happening right under their nose. And we know that because there was a second DPA. So you can figure that one out yourself. Some were, we have at least two over $50 million annually, which is just an obscene amount of money. I used to say the monitor's budget is unlimited and it's always exceeded.
Yeah.
But there are some that have been extraordinarily successful. And I would point directly to Volkswagen, which is very loud and very proud about saying we worked with our monitor to improve a variety of areas. I think BP also had a very successful monitor program, but those monitors were true compliance professionals. They had subject matter expertise for the areas they didn't have subject matter expertise. They would bring in someone. And it's certainly with Volkswagen, I think Volkswagen and has said they came out on the other side of their DPA as a better company.
Look, it certainly focuses the mind. You've got a monitorship, whatever their experience, they are going to be your monitor. And certainly I've seen colleagues that have worked under monitorships talk about how it's almost the best thing that's ever happened to them in their career because they've got resources. Suddenly the C-suite, the board understands what needs to be done, and then they unlock and unleash the power of the compliance function to do what it needs to do and do it best. And again, sustainable compliance is the thing, right? We're not just trying to check the boxes of the monitorship under 3 to 6 years. We want to make sure that what we're building is sustainable. So the worst thing I could think of is to do it for the monitor and then abandon it as soon as they turn their back.
And we've seen that.
Yep, definitely seen that too. Low level. Okay, let's go back into your decisions then to focus in on corporate compliance. Let me ask this, Tom. You said when you had choices to do what you loved and you focused in on corporate compliance because you enjoyed that. What did you enjoy about corporate compliance that made you run back to it?
What I enjoyed was we all go to law school, and I'm going to speak for every lawyer ever, thinking we're going to change the world.
Right.
And we're going to help the downtrodden and those who need representation. We're going to step up and do it. Not quite true once you get out in the real world for a lot of us. And so I'd always wanted to do something that I thought was furthering the ball of humanity. And of course, I'm a Texan, so we think, talk, and eat money a lot. So that's not something we're shy about talking about. And being very successful is something we talk about a lot, big egos and all of that jazz. And so in the corporate world, what I realized was, or what I stumbled upon was, corporate compliance makes businesses run more ethically. And then I discovered more ethically run companies are actually better run companies. And so I put the two and two together, and I said, if I can help fight the international scourge of bribery and corruption, which costs the world $3 trillion annually, according to the United Nations, that's a good thing. And I can do it in the context of being a corporate lawyer, working in the energy industry in Houston, Texas, pontificating, evangelizing, writing, speaking, etc. And I just became incredibly passionate about doing anti-corruption work inside of corporations. Everyone has a role in the anti-corruption world, academics, speakers. So you've been in this world a long time, so you know you can have a multitude of different roles. And I chose to be the corporate compliance evangelist. In fact, that's why I took the title compliance evangelist, because I think in ancient Greek, an evangelist is the bringer of the good news.
Yes.
So I wanted to bring the good news of compliance to the corporate world, because I think effective compliance equates to more efficient business process, equates to greater ROI.
Speaking my love languages, all of them. That it is the good news. I do 100% agree with you, and I agree with you also. Our little boy and little girl dreams of saving and changing the world. We're closer to it in this role because we are impacting decision making at scale. So I, in my one company, can do that, but you, as the compliance evangelist for the industry, are helping all of us do that. It's a movement. It's a change movement. So yeah, really grateful to you for sharing that kind of motivation. I certainly empathize with that. And yeah, this podcast is about massive change, right? People that have operationalized their intentions and had massive impact. And you've done that beyond what you did at Halliburton, but beyond what you did at Drilling Controls. You found a way to influence beyond the company walls. Now, I know you mentioned a little bit about leveraging what you could find out about social media, but talk to me a bit about that push, Tom, from it's wonderful to be the head of a compliance function, but you've decided to help the whole industry. Talk to me about that decision to go further and have impact at scale.
Sure. So it started with blogging, and I was the third blogger in compliance. There was the FCPA blog, there's the FCPA professor, and there's me. And there was. Now there are, of course, others. But remember, I couldn't leave the house.
Yeah.
So I started blogging, and literally 6 months later, I went to my first compliance conference, and I introduced myself, and I got the same response. Oh, you're the blogger guy. We wondered who that was. No one knew you. And so I became known as that blogger guy. But that was just an attempt to market. And it was extraordinarily successful because 6 months after starting my little practice, I had a worldwide compliance consulting practice. One time somebody from London called me and said, we'd like to meet all your clients in Houston. And I thought about it a minute and I said, I don't have any clients in Houston. I have 6 in London.
Wow. But
that was all blogging. But it turned out the blogging did 2 other things that were equally important. Number one, it forced me to learn because I had to read and digest whatever I was writing about. And number 2, I remember when I went to blogging every day, and after the first year I did that, I emailed Dick Casson, who founded the FCPA blog, and said, Dick, look at me, I wrote a blog a day for a year, and he emailed me back, great, when's your book coming out? And so I wrote a book, and it was my first book, and I've written 38 since then.
38. Oh my goodness. We've got to talk about that. I did not know it was 38. I knew you were prolific, but my goodness. Okay.
If I might then, the same week Upping Your Game came out, the compliance handbook 6th edition came out.
Oh,
So
look at that. Yes, we need to talk about the Compliance Handbook as well. Gosh, so much to cover here. Okay, blogging. You were ahead of your time on blogging. You were one of the, like I said, first or top 3 to be blogging in this space, just at the moment when compliance was having its own resurrection, when we needed to figure out compliance quickly. Many GCs or litigators were asked to hurry up and build a compliance function. They probably Googled and they found you or Mike Volkov or Dick Cassin, like you said, and that was the beginning. So you were ahead of your time on blogging for this industry, and then you transitioned into podcasting, which I think when I first saw your name, I don't think podcasts were a thing. I don't think I ever even listened to a podcast. Now podcasts are taking over Netflix. It's incredible where podcasts have ended up in our social environment. So talk to us about the podcasting, because that's a big part of the way you've gotten your voice out there.
So I have to credit a friend who used to be a consultant, but went in-house, Howard Sklar. And Howard had a blog, and he emailed me one day and said, hey, let's start a podcast. So we started the FCPA Compliance Report in 2012. And then Howard went in-house and he couldn't do the pod, so I took it over. And so that I've been blogging since 2012. In 2017, I was trying to figure out the next move I wanted to make. And I thought, let's create a podcast network, and we will be a one-stop shop for all information in the podcast format. So I went to SCCE, I went to Compliance Week, I went to ECI, and I get zero interest. And my pitch was, look, it will not take away from anything that you're doing. It will supplement what information you're putting out. And not that I would ever suggest anything anti-competitive. We will corner all the market on advertising. Anyway, no interest. So I said, bleep it, I'll do it myself. So I just started the Compliance Podcast Network in 2017. In 2019, putzed along for a couple of years, and I had trouble. I had to rope people to coming on the pod. I remember I dragged my then college daughter to do a podcast even. In 2019, I decided I either had to fish or cut bait. I had to fully commit or move it to hobby status. So I decided to quit practicing law, which for me meant compliance law, and bought all the cool toys, built this huge network. And at the end of the year, I'd made about $10,000. And I thought that was an interesting experiment. I guess I have to go back to practicing law. And so I did in Q1 of 2020. And then about March 15th, they shut the country down. And so I thought, oh, this will be a nice 2 to 3 week vacation. Won't this be fun? Well, obviously it wasn't that. But so I'm sitting around trying to figure out what the heck to do. And starting at May 15th of that year, I started getting calls literally from every compliance product company, which with the same question, how long to get access to your network? And because of the work I'd done the year before, the answer was the same, 24 hours. Because it was just a drop and drag or a plug and play.
Yeah.
And so my little world blew up. Another big thing was I literally had nothing else to do but that. And so I spent 4 to 6 hours a day learning how to do social media. And all the social media I create around every podcast, that started then. And that was me writing out the tweets, all the LinkedIn, doing all the production work, everything. But that just fueled the whole growth because once again, nobody else was doing it. So it was my name everywhere. Yeah. And my little world exploded and here we are.
There's so much in that story that I want to underscore for our listeners in terms of the path to success. It's not always rosy, number one, right? And you had to make a burn the boats decision, right? You had to decide, I'm all in, I'm going to try. And that's really inspiring. And then it's like a roller coaster. And then you only made $10,000. You're like, oh, is he about to quit? But that moment when you did the reckoning and said, oh, well, that was an interesting experiment, you were 3 feet from gold and you didn't know it, right? You stopped right there. You did not know it, but you invested in yourself and you rolled up your sleeves. You had this, I like to call, there's this gentleman, David Meltzer, that says happiness is the persistent, consistent, without quit pursuit of your potential. And that's, to me, that's you, Tom. Like, you didn't know social media, you didn't know tweeting, you didn't have a microphone, you didn't know podcasting, but you knew what you could achieve.
Like to cite to Plato, with preparation meets opportunity, luck occurs.
There we go.
And that's what happened.
You're very lucky because of that.
Very lucky.
Those two things, preparation and opportunity. So absolutely, I love that story, that kind of hero's journey of like, we were trying, we had a vision, we had a thing. It doesn't always work out. And that's what I want our listeners to hear. It doesn't work out when you think it is, but don't give up because you're 3 feet from gold. And again, that preparation from the blogging onwards, the resilience that you showed, didn't happen overnight, right? Planted seeds all over the place, but in their seasons, they don't grow immediately. But here we are then in 2020, which is your moment. You become ubiquitous when it comes to the compliance industry. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things you've done, and then I want to get into maybe some of your favorite episodes. Let's do that. But before I get to favorite episodes, where the podcast network is, that you're talking about 2020, we're only 5 years later, and it's a behemoth now. It's a magnificent thing. The number of opportunities you give to people like me to learn more, to lean in on things I never thought I would do. It's funny you mentioned about your daughter dragging her along. I have to keep mine out of the studio. They want to be podcasters because of you, because they see how many opportunities there are. They look at all those little screenshots of what you do. So I think recently you launched, we'll talk about the awards you've gotten in a minute, but you launched an awards program as well for the podcast on your platform. Can you talk about that? I know a bit of self-service here because my friends Lisa and Mary were winners of the Agora Award, the first Agora Award, and I'm on the podcast with them, the Great Women in Compliance. But please talk about why you decided to amplify the voices in that way and the awards.
I'm just a big fan of awards, because I think you should acknowledge and honor those who go above and beyond in whatever area, whatever it may be. And Compliance Week has a series of awards. SCCE has an award. I figured I should have the podcast award.
Yes.
So there we go.
Very nice. And I didn't get any of the details from, but you recently won a podcasting award yourself. I know you've won many, but what was the most recent one? Was it the Texas Hill podcast?
So I won 5 in April from the Communicators Award. I won, 2. One for the Rotary Club of Kerrville. That's a local one. That's my local podcast network. One for, there's a group of women artists in Kerrville who call themselves the Magnificent Seven. And I started a podcast for them, and that podcast won an award. I met a movie director in this part of the country. And so I did and he was having a movie released in early 25. And so I did a limited 10-part series on, it's essentially how to do an independent film in America today. And so I interviewed him. He was the executive producer, director, writer. And I interviewed his cast and crew, and that won an award. Probably the one I'm most proud of is last year, there was an organization called SIPE, and they're a part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And we did a podcast series focusing on compliance and ethics for businesses in Africa. And that won an award. And I told the SIPE folks, this is the most important one I've ever done, because the sophistication of the African compliance scene just blew me away. And it wasn't Tom Fox's handbook. It was local solutions to local problems. And it just, if I thought about it, I would have realized they've already done this, but I didn't know about it. So that one was very meaningful to me.
That's magnificent. And look, on that point to segue, your podcasts aren't just fun chats with cool people. They really do provide roadmaps and, like you said, local solutions for local people from our peers. Many of us are stuck in the business as usual day to day. But when we get onto your podcast or we listen to one of them, we get to dream bigger. We get to create the future together. We get to unravel and solve problems that we all face in what can be considered quite a lonely profession, right? You're on your own a lot of the time in your company, in your four walls of the company, but you give us the community.
I hope so.
No, you really do. And I know you and I talked about this when we met last month at Compliance Week. I'm starting to see the podcast medium as a way to not only learn my skill as my craft as a compliance officer, but maybe to teach compliance in-house to my employees. Tell me a little bit about that. How can we mine the years of content that you have overseen the creation of for knowledge management and wisdom?
So it's engagement, and it's in creative engagement in my case. And it is putting information out in a way that's storytelling.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And I've always known there was something about the audio format that was different than the visual format. And because I had so many people tell me over the years, you're just in my head. And when I hear your voice, I associate that with compliance. I know something's coming I should listen to. It turns out that there's neuroscience to back that up. And I've now seen 2 presentations on neuroscience of the brain where they talk not about podcasting affecting certain quadrants of the brain, but storytelling. And it turns out the quadrant of the brain that it impacts is the one that releases serotonin, which is the feel-good part of your brain. And there's actually science behind that. And storytelling is just baked into human DNA. And that's what I try to do.
That's right. You've unlocked the power, the latent power of storytelling that we've always had from time immemorial. That is how everything was learned and how every skill was passed down. Language, everything was through storytelling. And you've done that for us in a way that, again, not just in service of me, the compliance professional that wants to learn about her craft, but don't forget, my role is to have engagement with the masses, right? The employees and the third parties. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. Look, talk about creating the future, Tom. You've laid the foundation for all of us to just dip in and look. With AI now, I see a future where we can use AI to mine your content to get exactly what we need and put it out. Let's think about that. I know AI is on your mind. Emerging technology is on your mind in many ways. We mentioned your one of your latest releases, Upping Your Game, a collaboration with Wei Chen on the emerging technology and how we need to, I think, to quote you, move to 2030 and beyond. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Let you talk about what inspired that and what did you hope to achieve with your book?
So it really came about, Wei Chen has definitely inspired the book. But I think as all compliance professionals know, on February 10th, the president ordered suspension of FCPA investigations and enforcement actions. And soon thereafter, and many of us wondered, well, what does this mean for us? And Wei Chen wrote a very influential blog post and said, we're at an inflection point. We need to make a decision. Are we going to move forward positively or not? And we need to collectively up our game as compliance professionals. And she suggested to do that by emphasizing the ethics and in ethics and compliance. I was very inspired by that. And I agree 100% that we are at an inflection point for the compliance profession. And we either evolve and grow beyond our legal and regulatory based roots, or I think at the end of the day would be consigned to a back office corporate function. So I wanted to look at AI and a tech solution. And so I used AI to help me write a book about AI and compliance.
And look at you again, looking around corners and being ahead of your time. Look, I'm not going to say it's not timely. We're all behind, right? And you are helping us up our game and keep up. But absolutely, we need to reimagine ourselves. One of my favorite things to talk about as well. And you're right. The way that compliance has positioned itself as a response to regulatory litigation, enforcement, very legalistic, could be our downfall if we don't up our game. The pushback is not just political, right? Like the pushback is real because we have shown up in a way as the police, the office of no, the office of slow down. And at some point, this inflection point, the technology and our business partners are going to move faster and beyond us and think of us as irrelevant. And so I love your call to action. How can we leverage technology to stay, not just keep up, but stay ahead of the game and serve in that looking around corners, unlocking responsible growth rather than, I don't know, the old notion of compliance. I always say we need a rebranding because everybody associates compliance with friction, mandatory training, slow stuff, 60s era kind of training that you must click through. And we definitely need to change that. So your book doesn't just cover training, it covers all the things, right? Risk assessment, investigations. It was an eye opener for me. Even I think of myself as someone that likes to keep up. But when I read your book and talked to you about it, I was astounded by the ways that people are moving forward. And again, back to that point of community, what would you know if you don't get together in a forum that you create to learn about this? So tell me what surprised you most about the way people are using and leveraging AI for compliance.
I think that we really are at the starting point. And one of the goals I always have is to put the information or to put the knowledge out there and just see where every different person takes it. And so yesterday I was doing a podcast with Nick Gallo and we were going to talk about third-party risk management and compliance. And so we went through how you could move from detection to prediction or reactive to proactive in managing your third parties. And then somehow I just said, Nick, do you think we can use this to actually enhance business operations? And we ended up talking nearly 30 minutes on the positive aspects of integrating third-party risk management directly into your business operations with AI, so that as you start the process of the third-party onboarding, it's not 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it's not 2 days. It's almost immediate. Then you can implement, then you can monitor the third party in a way that sees actions which might lead to a violation way before they do. And I realized this is the golden key. If we can integrate it directly into business operations and we move to enhancing and enabling business operations, because literally we are moving at the speed of light in compliance.
Well, again, look, you're speaking to Nick Gallo, who's an entrepreneur himself. He owns a tech company. And that's exactly the kind of conversation that we should be having with people like Nick, because it's the art of the possible, right? Now we get to think about what we would need. And the technology will catch up with us very quickly. So we need to stay ahead in terms of asking for what we need. I love that. One thing you and I like to talk about also is the user experience in terms of this tech. And the user here is the business, for example. The user here is the third party. The user here is the employee or the procurement team, for example. How are we making the tech rise above the noise, really, and something that I would reach out and use, and I will make my daily practice? And so what have you seen there in terms of how the tech is evolving, not to be just something we bring on and it's a massive data that no one ever uses for decisions? What have you seen there in terms of how the tech's evolving to improve the business, like you say, keep the business moving forward at the same pace?
If we just stick with third parties, I have certainly seen, and I have issued 60-page long questionnaires to third parties.
Yes.
And that's how now it's 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but it incredibly frustrated third parties because no one would accept anyone else's form. You had to completely do it all again. And it was a huge amount of time and effort just to go through the onboarding process to see if you could qualify to be an agent. So that's a company outside your organization, so a true third party. But that's just one example of how AI, when you have the basic corporate information, they can do all the rest.
Right.
And they can check media across the globe. They can check all of the US and UK bad guy lists. They can do all of that literally at the speed of light. So that's one improvement of the experience. But I try to think about the Business Roundtable statement of a purpose of a corporation back in 2018, where they identified 5 separate stakeholder groups: shareholders, employees, third parties you do businesses, localities, and the regulators, and that, or the general public, and that there you can use AI to have a dialogue with and interact with any of those stakeholders to your organization.
No, that's a brilliant example. And I wish I could say that those long questionnaires are a thing of the past. They are absolutely not a thing of the past. And in fact, with all the emerging regulation on supply chain and third-party due diligence coming from Europe and elsewhere, they're only getting longer. And I remember having 400 questionnaires coming in for a $2,000 deal. Now, that just the math doesn't math. And what are we saying there? We won't answer the questionnaire, so we won't deal with those customers. That's not a good answer. We need another way. And I agree with you. I'd like to see a place where we've got one questionnaire that works for due diligence, right? One NDA, one questionnaire. And to your point, the data is already stored so it can be answered in an instant. And then hopefully the regulators will see that too. We don't need to be asking that many questions as a checkbox exercise. So we could talk about that a lot. Tom, AI is going to transform the way we do things. But one thing that seems like it's always been a bit of a rut is how to have a good speak up culture where our employees don't feel that they're going to be retaliated against, or there'll be futility when they do speak up or speak to each other. So psychological safety and culture is a big part of what we do as a compliance function. I know you have leaned in to make sure we deal with this very early on in the human life cycle. You've got some children's books out there about speaking up. So tell me why you focused your children's books on speaking up. And my kids read them. They're very powerful. We'll talk about what they are, but why speaking up? How does that fit into all of this?
I think when my daughter was 15, I asked her if she knew what a whistleblower was, and she didn't. And so I explained, and she looked at me and said, "Yeah, Dad, that's what we call a rat."
Uh-huh.
And I thought, there's an opportunity for rebranding here.
Yeah.
That was really the genesis of it. But it's important that kids grow up learning that if you see something, say something. It's okay to speak up. Raise your hand, whatever phrase you want to use, that we really need more of that. But the culture part, what I've really come around to thinking, Hemma, is there's two parts or maybe three parts to this. Part one, you articulated, which is psychological safety, that it's safe. You're not going to be retaliated against. But I've really coming around to thinking that equally important is listening. I got interviewed earlier this week and someone said, what are the three most important things you would say to the compliance professional? And I usually say document, but it said listen. And Bob Conlon, he was a former CEO at Navex. He said, you don't have a true speak up culture till you pair it with a listen up culture.
That's right.
And so training middle managers to listen is perhaps as important as training lower level employees to walk in their manager's office. But the benefits of listening are, you can't quantify them, because once people recognize my boss is going to listen, they're going to tell them about new ideas, new innovations, new strategies, new tactics. And the benefits of that, like I said, I still think you can calculate. So you've got to have psychological safety where someone will raise their hand and speak up, but you have to have people who listen and then report that information up the chain.
It's so important. I love the idea of a listen up campaign or a listen up culture. This idea of training people to receive the speak up as a gift and information and to understand the joy of a fully informed decision. I think that's so important. And I just want to go back to what we said about storytelling, the art of storytelling as a human condition. We never talk about the art of story listening. And on the other side of that storyteller, and I have this image of cavemen in a circle telling stories, ancestral stories, but there was a culture of listening. You couldn't tell stories if no one was going to listen to you. So I agree with you that it's really important that we lean in there. And actually, so insightful, Tom, because I mentioned that the fear of retaliation, the fear of futility, those are both born out of not being listened to or not understanding what happens to the information after you transfer it. So I love that. And again, just I want to underscore the bit on the children. I hope I create psychological safety for my children. I'm lucky that they come home from school and tell me things. I had this just last night. They also forbid me from telling their teachers what they've told me. Not because the teachers have done anything wrong, but already there's this culture among the young children that if they tell, something bad will happen. Or even me and a teacher trying to help my child will cause retaliation from the masses. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. I love the way that you look at that glass half full to lean into the listening. Very important. The other thing you do very well, Tom, is you have been a mentor to many when it comes to compliance. I know you do it through your podcasting work, your blogs and your writing, but you do it just one-on-one as well. And it's funny, I was thinking about asking this question, listening is also important for mentoring. And I think that's why I know you do it so well. So tell me a little bit about your role in mentoring and shaping the future of compliance professionals, whether through the blogs or in person or the podcasts.
So my parents were teachers, so that just is the way I was raised. And I saw my parents do that a lot. It just seems to me to be second nature. A lot of people are a lot younger than me. And I often wonder, is it the little brother I never had or whatever, little sister I never had, or they're my cousins or something. But it's really about the compliance community. And I certainly didn't start this. The compliance community was created by our founders, and it is a very sharing, open community, and we share ideas and we help each other. I'm sure there's some competitors out there, but they don't tend to do very well or get a lot of play. It's just something that's second nature to me. And now I'm at the kind of last phase of my career, and it's certainly time for me to give back and bring up and empower the next generation of compliance professionals. So I teach at Case Western Law School, and I love doing that because I feel like I'm doing so.
So glad that you are paying it forward in that way. And please don't say you're at the end of your career. I know there's so many things coming next. In fact, that's what I wanted to ask you about to close. What's next for Tom Fox? And if I may, I'm going to take liberties and say, please tell us about what's next for the children's books. I know you've got some ideas about bringing those to life. Please tell us what's next for you actually leaning in yourself and creating AI technology. So tell me all those things and all the things I don't know. What can we expect from Tom Fox going forward?
I'm actually in discussions with Nickelodeon about making a podcast around my children's book series. So we'll see where that goes. In terms of AI, I have fully embraced AI. I'm going to continue to embrace AI. I'm going to use it and explore it in every way I can to make it available for creators like myself and those in the corporate compliance world so that we'll all be able to, I think, really expand both our personal creativity, but who knows where we can take all of this.
Oh, watch this space, indeed. I can't wait to introduce my children to the podcast Nickelodeon version of your books. I can't wait to read more of what you put out. We'll have to learn more about those 38 books I haven't read, but I've read at least 2 or 3 of them. And Tom, just thank you for caring so much about your community, about us, your podcasters. I'm going to be bold. Thank you for, as a little Tom Fox, even though it was inspired by your grandfather, wanting to change the world, because that's exactly what you're doing at scale. This podcast is called Unless because of the Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax. And the quote is, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. In the short time I've known you, maybe now probably 5, 6, 7, 8 years, things have improved massively because of you. So thank you. And I know you're not done. Don't threaten us with an end of career. I know you're not done. I can't wait to see what else you do. So thank you for joining me, Tom. Thank you for everything you've done for me personally and for the community. And I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you so much, Hemma.